want to start with a bit of your story, the impossible mission, which I just laid out. Not fair, but David,
Okay.
let people know, like, why are you on this earth, and how did you come to being this really truly amazing human being?
Yeah, well, I think it started with a pretty crushing beginning, and when you know how the beginning was, it doesn't necessarily determine how the ending is, right? And so I actually grew up in the rural Midwest, in a kind of an Indian reservation, very economically challenged, and just a place with very little hope and very little upward mobility. But I came from a family of entrepreneurs, and I began my first business at 11 years old when I decided, as the last child in town that didn't have a bicycle, that it was my turn. And
I
so,
love
and one afternoon, I went out and I earned enough for that bicycle by selling some things.
Hold,
That was really the
Laura, hold on.
Yep.
One afternoon.
One
I mean, you just kind of like slide by that, but
Yes. Well, I was 11 years
by
old.
the way, you'll see a trend here. So
So I guess you know that upbringing, and then finally reaching what I consider at a very young age, success financially, and then realizing that there's nothing fulfilling necessarily about that. And so at 19, I began exploring a life of service. Made my
okay,
first.
I'm gonna have you back of the bus because I told David off camera if we can do it a little bit tighter, that would be great. But are you okay just sharing a little bit about the inspiration? I mean, when you were younger, what you actually did with your family, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's extraordinary, dude. That's not something to and everybody, please. I mean, I'm going to embarrass you, and I know you don't like this, but this is such a beautiful story, and I love this story on so many levels. Most importantly for our listeners right now, because if you're feeling like you're down in the dumps, or you don't have an opportunity because you didn't get this possibility, you didn't get this one, those are all excuses. So could you tell us, please, that?
Sure. So, as part of that upbringing, very economically challenged, we did without a lot. I experienced hunger. I experienced thirst. In fact, there was a time where we had gone to the local food bank and we had come so many times that they turned us away. Can you imagine that? That's the bottom, and there's nowhere else to fall from there. And
You were
so,
about how old then?
uh, uh, between 10, 11, 12 years old. And so, one afternoon after the bicycle fundraising success, my mom came home. At the time, minimum wage in the central Midwest was around $4.50 an hour. And that amount of money I created literally out of thin air
At your bike.
was
In one afternoon.
in one afternoon was more than she made in several days after taxes. And so she said, okay, here's what we're doing. And my father was a burgeoning artist at the time, and he did pen and ink drawings and different things of cowboy art. So we printed those and made editions. And then at 11 years old, I left school, and I went to selling art full time for the family. And it started at $25.
11 years old,
Yep.
you left school.
I left school as educated formally to about the 5th grade. Went out with those wares, and my father was not paying child support. We really had no other choice, and this was the way I earned a living up through until about 19 years old.
You took care of the child support, and you were the child.
Yeah.
Let's be straight about that, right? So at 11 years old, you left school, and you became the father.
Yep.
And took care of your mother.
And I traveled Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, parts of Colorado, Arkansas, Missouri. These states were places I would go and literally knock on doors and say, would you be interested in this? And I made contact with literally tens of thousands of people. And in the very first year of doing this, a gentleman named Tom, who was the salesman at the printing press we used in Tulsa, Oklahoma, he said, you have sold 110,000 pieces in 6 months at $8, $12, and $16 a piece. And so you can do the math. It became, a very good income source. But I also became I guess, almost indentured to it. Like there was no way out of it. There was no future for me. And at a point,
Because at that age, you're making approximately how much? Ballpark.
I was
How
making
old and how much?
between, eventually when others, art got involved, making between probably 2,500, sometimes $40,000 a day.
Wow. And how old?
Uh, it was before I turned 19. Yeah.
That's why we don't rush through that story, my friends. That is inspiring.
The point was, there wasn't true fulfillment in it for me. It wasn't my reason for being.